Got to bring in my think tank tonight. Outside the courthouse in Sanford, Florida, criminal defense attorney Mark O'Mara, who in that same courthouse represented George Zimmerman successfully years ago. In studio, criminal defense investigator Charles Mittelstadt, criminal defense attorney and former prosecutor Latasha Barnes, and criminal defense attorney Lawrence, not related to George Zimmerman.
Thank you.
Thank you. I just want to make that clear because we've got Mark with us tonight. Let me start with you, Mark O'Mara. Your reaction to the breaking news tonight that Grant Amato tomorrow morning, we have learned from the lead attorney in the case, Jeffrey Dowdy, will take the stand in his own defense.
More often than not, your client is your own worst witness, and it is an extraordinarily scary and dangerous thing to do, to put your client on the stand. Now, there are some cases where you almost have to. For example, a self-defense case, you have to put your client on the stand to say, I acted because I had to, I was in fear, etc. But in this case, this is a circumstantial evidence case where the state has to disprove all of the potential hypotheses of innocence, as we call them. So when you put someone like Grant on the stand and expose him not just to what he's going to say on direct, but what he's going to have to live through on cross-examination, I think it's extraordinarily dangerous. I know Jeff Dowdy. I know that they thought it through and that it, in their mind, is the right decision. But I am very afraid of what's going to happen to Amato's defense tomorrow.
All right. I like it when the defendant takes the stand. It gets us closer to the truth of what happened. Latasha Barnes.
Yes. Hey, how are you?
Good. Your reaction to he's chosen to take the stand.
Yeah, I don't think that's a good idea for the defense, in my opinion. I totally agree with Mr. Zimmerman. I think it's always dangerous.
Mr. O'Mara.
Mr. O'Mara, I'm so sorry. Mr.
Zimmerman's
O'Mara.
there. We'll hear from him, but he's probably going to say the same thing. He's probably going to say the same thing.
Right, exactly. But I don't agree. I don't think they should put him on the stand at all. Cross-examination is going to, I think he's already kind of lied in his interview.
Right,
so
he had a little inconsistency there as well.
Exactly, so there could be more inconsistencies tomorrow, so I do not believe he should testify.
Lawrence?
Well, I concur with you and myself that he probably shouldn't testify because it sounds like there's a digital trail, certainly. He's going to have to do a lot of explaining, and he's going to be flip-flopping, going back and forth, trying to figure out how to get out of it. So listen, these lawyers know their case better than anybody. And the client may just want to testify. I do have one sort of problem, though. I don't know why the lawyers tipped anybody that the client was testifying, because now the state's going to be up all night long.
I think they knew already.
For cross. Yeah, but you never know.
I think they knew already. Charles, you've looked at all the evidence in this case, all the forensics, everything else. Are you surprised that this case now is going to be about Grant Amato on the stand?
I actually am, Vinny. So you wonder what holes are they trying to plug, right? What are they trying to backfill as far as the state's case so far, unexplained things in their case so far that necessitates him testifying. When a defendant testifies, he essentially assumes, he or she assumes the burden for exculpating themselves, and it does away with all the good lawyering, all the great cross-examination that may have happened, and it ultimately comes down to whether this jury believes Grant Amato or not. And that's a lot of pressure on one guy who's already had some inconsistent statements, and where there's a gap of electronic activity that he's going to have to explain away throughout that evening.
All right, I want to ask the same question, but I want to just change it just a little bit. What if he's innocent? He's factually innocent. Grant Amato did not do it. Does that change the equation on this decision to take the stand? Latasha, I'm going to you first.
Yeah, of course. If he didn't do it, yes. I mean, obviously, I think that it's going to be advantageous for him to take the stand if he is innocent, in fact. But as I stated before, the inconsistencies that he had in his initial interview, I just don't think it's a good idea for them to put him on the stand. And it's just, like he was just saying, that it just takes away from all the good cross that the defense had. It really can hurt their case. I don't agree.
Even if he's innocent?
Even if he's innocent.
How does it hurt the case if he... Mark, how can it hurt his case if he factually is innocent and did not commit this crime?
Because he is not a lawyer, he is not a professional witness. We know there are some inconsistencies. And Vinny, you know, you and everybody else who's sitting there with you can rip apart most any good witness. And I don't care that he could be telling the truth. And quite honestly, at this point, I contend that if he is factually innocent, then the defense has or should have proven that factual innocence already through their cross-examination and through their other presentation of witnesses. We don't have to go too far into the distant past to remember how a criminal defendant got on the stand to answer 1 or 2 questions in the Nelson case and was on the stand for, what was it, 45, 50 minutes of blistering cross-examination. And I'm afraid that even if he is factually innocent, that the prosecution is going to have enough of a heyday so that they will convince the jury he's lying and is therefore guilty.
Even if he's innocent?
I don't think it has anything to do. That should not factor into the equation whatsoever.
How could factual innocence, you're accusing me of murdering my family and I didn't do it?
Because he's a flawed defendant to begin with. Yes. Aside from these murders, this guy has all sorts of issues. I mean, look at this compulsion that he has, the fact that he has fleeced his family out of $200,000. He's obsessed. His activity level shows that. He is flawed from beginning to end, and that alone is going to make him just susceptible to vicious cross-examination. And so the fact that he has the potential of being innocent shouldn't factor into the defense's decision for him to testify whatsoever. Now, he may have insisted on it.
Yeah, well, you can't look at it like from some point of view like he's innocent, he must testify. The lawyers have to look at it as what does it add to the case. If it doesn't add anything to the case, then there's no reason for somebody to testify.
Wait,
it doesn't make a difference.
Are you telling me the trial has nothing to do with whether or not he actually did it?
The trial does, but whether he testifies or not doesn't impact my decision as to whether I should advise him to testify or not testify. The question becomes, does it add anything to our case, and how good of a witness will you be? I've had a lot of innocent clients who are terrible witnesses. They're not trained. They're not police officers who go to thousands of hours of school and testify every day in court. You get crossed up, and the jury looks at that person and says, I didn't like the way he answered that question. It could be one little thing. If it doesn't add anything or move your case along, there's no reason to testify, even if you're 150% innocent.
Vinnie, what case have you ever been a part of where it's about the absolute truth? It's always about what you can prove or disprove. It's never the entire truth. I've never been part of a case where the entire truth comes out. It's always some version of the truth. It's always some aspect of the truth. It's what the prosecution can establish based upon their theory. It's an interpretation of circumstantial evidence, and as in this case, largely, and it's what the defense can disprove in large measure as well. So it's never just about the actual truth.
And as well as being a former prosecutor, it's the state's burden, right? It's the state's burden.
Oh, absolutely.
They have the burden here, so that he doesn't have to say anything. And I don't think that it adds any value.
Just think about this for a minute, though. Could you imagine being a person and you're accused of executing your mother, your father, and the brother that you idolize, and you didn't do it?
So I think,
how could you stop yourself from testifying?
So you're talking about something different, because
if you're factually innocent,
I agree. It is different. Here's what I agree with. I feel in a lot of cases like this, real serious cases, that the jury's always going to want to hear from the defendant, my client, and that typically I want them to testify to answer the question, I didn't do it. Right. But in this case, because it's so circumstantial, he may have no reason to testify. It may not get him anywhere. It may really make it worse, because just from the outside looking in, it sounds like the evidence is pretty bad to begin with circumstantially. It can only really make it even worse.
All right, we've got a 13th juror question for you folks tonight. It's all about Grant Amato, and Chandler was telling you about the tears inside the courtroom today. Well, do Grant Amato's tears help the prosecution or defense? If he does it tomorrow when he testifies, I think it'll help him. Anyway, go to the CourtTV Facebook page or Vinnie Politan CourtTV, and don't forget, 8 a.m. coverage starts. Grant Amato has told us through his attorney that he is going to testify tomorrow morning. Fasten your seatbelt. Big day coming up tomorrow here on CourtTV. Grant Amato. It's been confirmed through his lead attorney, Jeff Dowdy, that he is going to take the stand in his own defense tomorrow morning. Our coverage begins at 8 a.m. Do not miss it. Direct examination, and then, of course, cross-examination. Well, Grant Amato was sort of the focus today as well in the courtroom, because we saw something from him that we've seen little pieces of, but today, over the top, breaking down emotional during the testimony of the medical examiner when they were showing photos of his family, especially his brother Cody.
He showed the injuries to the gunshot wound injuries to the face, head, and my my head diagram.
And with regard to the photographs, are they a true and accurate representation of the injuries and wounds that you observed on Cody Amato's head?
They are.
And face. And with regard to the diagram, is it a true representation of the injuries that you observed to Cody Amato's face and head?
Yes, they are.
I'd offer them into evidence as state's exhibits. Let me put up the 341 and ask you to tell the jury what we're seeing.
Okay, so we're looking at the right side of Cody's face, and just above the ruler, you can see the gunshot wound entrance and a bruise that's associated with it underneath the eye.
Let me show you 342.
And this is a little bit of a closer up shot. We're opening the eye to show that the eye itself is not involved, but you can see the gunshot wound entrance in the center of the photo and the bruise.
Let me show you 343.
Here we're looking at the back of the head and scalp, and you can see within the hair there is an injury, which will later be described as gunshot wound exit.
Let me show you 344.
And just as I do with the other cases, I shaved the area where there was hair present so you can see the actual injury. And this is a gunshot wound exit on the back of his head.
And 345.
And this is my body diagram of Cody Amato, and I've drawn in the gunshot wound entrance below the right eye and the bruise that's underneath the eye. And then you can also see the gunshot wound exit that I drew in. And then this indicates that little scrape or abrasion that was present on the right earlobe.
What a contrast between that Grant Amato and the Grant Amato that we saw in the interview interrogation room with police, with the Seminole County Sheriff's Department, who is not emotional at all, talking about his parents and not curious about the death, and it's just so different. So maybe this is the Grant Amato that the jury will see tomorrow morning when he testifies. Let's bring back in our think tank. Let's go to Mark O'Mara, who's down at the courthouse in Sanford, Florida. Mark, I saw emotion from the defendant today that I hadn't seen prior in this trial, not to this extent, when the photos of his family were being shown. Is that the emotion that you would expect to see during his testimony tomorrow?
Absolutely. You know, you asked a question day one of this, whether or not we believe that his tearing up, the little tear, was sincere. My one-word answer was sincere. And that's the way he's coming across. That emotion does not seem pretensed. It really seems the way it's coming across. And I say if, because you never know until he's sworn in. If he does testify tomorrow, and I hope he's doing it for the reason of adding something to the interview, then certainly that type of emotion, that type of openness has got to be shown to the jury, because maybe it'll come across as honesty.
Yeah. What are your thoughts about the emotion today? Do you think that's what we're going to see tomorrow?
I think so. I think it humanized him today when the jury saw him get emotional when seeing his brother. And I think it helps just in the fact that he's been kind of stoic, you know, the whole trial.
He's been much like this throughout.
Yeah. So I think it really helps the defense, and it will help him tomorrow in his testimony.
Do you think he'll be emotional? And if so, do you think the jury maybe starts to connect and realize that, oh, you know, maybe he didn't do it?
Well, I mean, I feel like we have this discussion every single time we have a case like this.
Of course we
about
do.
Emotion. You and I tend
That's
to
why I bring you in.
Right, we tend to disagree. I think emotion is overplayed, and it doesn't mean that somebody doesn't care just because they're not being emotional in an interview. It's a cold place. You're being interviewed. Some people just are detached, even if they're really innocent. And that's why I think somebody shouldn't testify, because if he doesn't show emotion like you want him to, then maybe he's guilty. So he's better off not testifying. Unless I mean, look, I'm not saying emotion doesn't help. I just don't base whether someone's innocent or guilty on it.
Right.
So I hope he's emotional for his sake.
For his sake. What do you expect from this guy?
I mean, listen, if he is, it certainly can't hurt his cause, right? I mean, it's something the jury's going to pay attention to. And I don't think there's any downside to it. But as LZ just said, I mean, if he doesn't, they're going to notice and they're going to hang on that, the fact that he didn't emote the way they wanted him to. But emoting, as long as it comes off as sincere, I think is probably in his favor.
Do you talk about that beforehand? I mean, he's going to testify. Do you say, hey, if you start crying, let it go, or do you just let whatever happens, happens? How does that work?
So to what you just said, you see him sitting up, standing straight. I mean, I always tell clients when we're in a courtroom, everybody's looking at you. So I'm very careful with just try to act natural. Don't.
How about on the witness stand, though? You know he's going to testify. What do you tell him?
Be natural. And if I'm prepping him and I see he's getting emotional, I'll say, hold that for the trial. I had a case a couple years ago that I won, and my client, through all the hours and hours of prep work we did, never once shed a tear. When I swore him in front of the jury, he broke down crying, and it was unbelievable. And so that worked great. I almost started crying because I couldn't believe he was crying finally after 2 years.
How is that? I mean, how do you prepare a client to testify?
You can prepare as much as you can and get him prepped, but when he gets on that stand, you know, who knows what's going to happen, but he needs to be natural. I totally agree with Mr. Zimmerman. He needs to be himself. If he has to let it go, let it go. I believe it's going to humanize him, as I stated before, and it will look sincere.
Mark, did Jeff Dowdy call you up and say, hey, I need some help here, come in and cross-examine, give him the run-through?
Are you asking me if he did that?
Yeah.
I could not answer that question.
I tried.
If he did, the way I would, the way I would try and prep him is, the problem with it is that we know witnesses, particularly defendants, and this one, he's on the stand fighting for his life, and he knows that. My concern is they try to over-explain inconsistencies. God forbid he gets obnoxious or defensive with a prosecution's cross-examination. It is so easy for us as skilled lawyers to make any witness, particularly a criminal defendant, look bad because they'll, again, over-explain, over-defend, whatever it might be. And my fear is you cannot do that, make anybody a good witness, certainly not Grant Amato. He didn't come across all that well in the interview, and it's going to be almost impossible for him to withstand good cross-examination, because all they got to do is, they just got to open up that can a little bit, and then everything starts flowing out, and I think it's dangerous to put him on. What is he going to add, excuse me, what is he going to add to this interview, to this defense, that is worth the risk of cross-examination?
All right. We shall see. We're going to talk more about it. We got a lot more straight ahead. But I want to hear from you, our 13th juror question. It's all about what you just saw, Grant Amato's tears. Do they help the prosecution or the defense? Go to CourtTV on Facebook or Vinnie Politan CourtTV on Facebook. Please vote on the poll. Leave a comment. I'll respond. And also, like and follow the pages while you're there.
So tell us what happened, Grant. Is that how you left your family?
No, I didn't do any of this.
This is a twisted case of alleged murder, money, and porn.
The rules are simple.
Prosecutors say he stole more than $200,000 from his family to send to this webcam model.
Some girl in Bulgaria got $200,000. I just want the truth.
And I'm asking you if you can please, pretty please, send me one of your videos.
So tell us what happened, Grant. Is that how you left your family?
No, I didn't do any of this.
Grant Amato is being accused of murdering his family.
Prosecutors say he stole more than $200,000 from his family to send to this woman he'd never met in person.
The rules are simple.
An adult webcam model in Bulgaria.
Some girl in Bulgaria got $200,000. I just want the truth to be told.
Amato admitted to police that he had an argument with his dad the night before his family was found slaughtered.
Sheriff's Office!
Poor baby, I'm so sorry.
No, you're not. You're not sorry at all.
This is a case like I've never seen.
Buying your stuff makes me feel weird.
This is a twisted case of alleged murder, money, and porn.
Did he kill to support his deadly porn addiction?
Who has a motive?
$200,000 is a whole lot of money.
Who has a motive to hurt your family?
Rest in peace.
Is there enough evidence to convict for murder?
There could be a legitimate defense here.
No physical forensic evidence linking him to this crime.
Who do you think did this?
I don't know. There's nothing that showed that I had done anything wrong.
Huge breaking news in the case. Grant Amato, the man accused of murdering his mother, father, and his brother execution style with a gun, is going to take the stand in his own defense tomorrow morning. This, according to his lead attorney, Jeff Dowdy, confirmed to CourtTV that he intends to put his defendant, his client, on the stand to tell his story, face cross-examination, everything that goes along with it. First thing tomorrow morning, our coverage begins at 8 a.m. right here on CourtTV. Today, another big day inside the courtroom. You had the prosecution resting their case, the defense putting up 8 witnesses in less than 2 hours, witness after witness after witness. They called to the stand Cody Amato's girlfriend. Again, Cody Amato, the older brother of Grant Amato. His girlfriend took the stand for the defense. Take a look.
Good afternoon, Ms. Young. I'm sorry we have to talk under these circumstances. I really appreciate you being here, and I'm sorry for your loss, okay? Did you previously know someone named Cody Amato?
Yes, I did.
Did you work with Cody Amato?
Yes, I did.
Now, on January 24th of 2019, around 9:15 p.m., were you working with Cody Amato?
Yes, I was.
Did Cody Amato leave somewhere around there?
Yes, he left around 9:15 p.m. that evening.
Okay. And before he left, did he tell you he was calling his dad?
He did not specifically say he was calling his father. He said, from what I told the police originally, that he received a phone call because that's what it appeared to look like from where I was sitting. However, phone records stated that that was incorrect. He looked at his phone and he put his phone up to his ear. And I looked at him and I said, "Who is that?" And he said, "My dad," and he walked away. So he made the call.
Okay, I understand that. Okay, so, but that's what he said that night, correct?
Yes, sir.
Okay. And then Cody left soon thereafter. Is that fair to say?
Yes, sir.
Did you get the impression that something was wrong?
Yes, sir.
And did he go ahead and leave after that?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Judge, may I have a moment? No further questions. Thank you.
Ross. Miss Young, do you know for a fact that Cody called his dad or received a call from his dad?
Yes. Phone records state that he made the call.
That he said he was calling his dad?
Yes, sir.
But it's true that you don't know if he actually spoke with his dad?
At the time, no, because he walked away.
Okay, so he never received a call from his dad?
No, sir.
And all he said to you before he actually made connection is that he's calling his dad, is that correct?
Yes, sir.
And you don't know whether or not he actually got through to his dad?
No, sir, I'm not aware if he did or not.
Okay. And You and Cody were dating at the time that this happened, correct?
We had started seeing each other a couple of months before he passed.
Did Cody have a blink camera in his room?
I'm sorry?
A blink camera in his room?
The camera that if someone walked in, it would alert them?
Right.
Yes, sir, he did.
Okay. Okay, thank you very much. Thank you.
So that was Cody Amato's girlfriend. They were dating apparently for a couple of months before he was murdered, and she testified for the defense. Does it help the defense? What exactly does it do? Does it blow up the timeline? And how will that sort of testimony impact what Grant Amato may say tomorrow? Let me bring back in my think tank with me. We've got Mark O'Mara down at the courthouse, and here in studio we've got Charles Mittelstadt, defense investigator. We've also got Latasha Barnes and Lauren Zimmerman, both criminal defense attorneys with us. Mark O'Mara, let me start with you. Cody Amato's girlfriend testifying for the defense. Clearly she didn't want to help the defense, I don't think, by the way she testified. Did anything she say there help them?
Well, I think it will, because in context, what the defense did all throughout today with the 8 witnesses was just pepper the prosecution with reasonable doubt. And again, it's the state's burden. They got to prove the case up. The defense doesn't have to do anything. But when you can start throwing some holes, even some shotgun pellets, into the prosecution case, this is one, some of the other semi-alibi witnesses or others, I think what they're doing is building up argument for reasonable doubt once they get to closing.
All right, and we're talking about the timeline here, right? So 9:15 is when he leaves work, right? He works at his girlfriend works at the same place. He leaves work at 9:15 after getting some sort of communication, a text, something's going on at home. He's attempting to call his father. After hearing that testimony, what impression does the jury get about what happened and what is happening? Do you think they believe that Grant and Cody's father made that phone call or was on the phone at that hour and was still alive?
I think that they may believe it. Like Mr. O'Mara just said, it's poking holes in the case. It's kind of the state's timeline. They're trying to blow up that, if you will. And yes, I totally agree with Mr. O'Mara. I think that it's creating reasonable doubt and it's blowing up their timeline completely.
Charles, how does this impact everything? You know, looking at these electronic communications going back and forth. Phone call, text message, two different things.
Listen, I think 2 things happened here. One is the fact that you have the girlfriend of one of the victims testifying for the defense. Maybe it was compelled and she was reluctant.
Sure it was.
Okay. But the fact of the matter is that from the jury's perspective, the girlfriend of one of the victims testifies. As far as what actually occurred, listen, it's irrefutable. It's in the phone record as to whether the call was made, who placed it, whether it connected, for how long. I mean, it's all in the phone record. You didn't need her to testify in order to be able to establish that. I think much of this is for effect.
Lawrence, anything that Grant Amato can testify about about what's happening here? It's 9:15. You know, his story is he's at the house. So if Cody is coming to the house at 9:15, he's got to explain what's going on. Like, why does Cody all of a sudden have to come back home, right? So he's going to have to tell this jury what's going on inside the house with mom and dad that requires Cody to leave his girlfriend and leave work and rush home.
Well, that's part of the problem. He's going to have to come up with whatever the story is that's consistent with what he's already confessed to when he testifies tomorrow. Otherwise, his case is completely done. He's going to have to give them a story. What was going on in that house? Why did Dad have to rush home? Why did Cody come home? And then explain, obviously, at some point, somebody killed these people, and it wasn't him, so when did he leave?
Who? Now, the other wild card in this trial, jury's asking questions. The jury is asking questions of every witness. I can't imagine how many questions they will have for this defendant. So you can't even prepare for that because you have no idea what they're going to ask.
That's a pop quiz right there.
Yes.
Dangerous.
And they've been asking a lot of questions.
They have been.
Trial.
But this is the most important witness of the case. Is there any preparation you give him for that moment? Anything that you could say to him? Because it's very unusual, first of all, for jurors to be asking questions. But you have no idea where they're going to go.
I strongly advise you against testifying tomorrow.
That's what you said. Hey, Mark, what are your thoughts about the fact that this jury is asking questions? I've seen it in other cases, like the Jodi Arias trial. The jury was asking questions, and they had about 4 sheets of questions for Arias after she testified, but she was on the stand for several weeks. How does he get ready for that? What will this jury ask? How dangerous is that part of this case?
It is way too dangerous. Again, you know, the balance point is, what does he have to offer, like a self-defense? What does he have to show? He's got to say, I acted in self-defense. That's not this case. This case is circumstantial evidence, and this one witness can undo the reasonable doubt that a circumstantial evidence case presents. Don't forget, under Florida law, when you have a circumstantial evidence case, the state has to disprove every reasonable hypothesis of innocence. Those hypotheses of innocence come from closing argument with the defense. So why give them an opportunity to show the ludicrous nature of your defense through your defendant's statements when there's no reason to? It's just so risky.
Very risky, but you'll see it live here on CourtTV beginning tomorrow morning, 8 a.m. Now, during the defense case, today, late in the day, they were bringing the funk. And it was a witness that may have raised a reasonable doubt in less than probably a minute and a half. We're going to show you that testimony in a moment. Also, our 13th juror question for you. It's about Grant Amato's tears. Do they help the prosecution or defense? Go to Facebook. Let me know. Big breaking news tonight. Grant Amato will take the stand in his own defense tomorrow morning. This according to his lead attorney. So get ready, folks. 8 a.m. coverage begins here at CourtTV. Tune in, lock it in, sit down and watch Grant Amato testify, direct, and of course, the cross-examination. So the defense today, 8 witnesses in 2 hours. And one of the witnesses may have raised a reasonable doubt here for the defense based upon what he heard and what he told investigators in this case. Remember, the timeline is so important to prosecutors when they pinpoint when these murders took place. They believe the mom was shot around 4:30, dad sometime around 5:30, then Cody when he comes home sometime between 9:30, 10 o'clock. So the defense wants the shooting and murders to take place later in the morning. Well, there's a witness, a neighbor who heard something in the morning. Let's take a listen.
Good afternoon, Mr. Funk.
Hi.
Could you please state your name?
Rodney Funk.
And where do you live, Mr. Funk? Okay. And on the morning of January 24th, that's going to be January 25th, 2019. Did you go out onto your driveway?
Yes.
And on that same date, did you hear anything out of the ordinary when you were out there?
Yes, I did.
Do you have any experience with firearms?
Yes.
What experience is that?
I have some at the house. I have a few.
Okay. Do you use them regularly?
No.
Every now and then?
Once in a while, yes, sir.
Okay. So, do you know what gunshots sound like?
Yes.
Based on your experience with the guns you own, correct?
Excuse me?
Based on the experience with the guns that you own, is that correct?
Yes. I mean, experience, to use them, yes.
Sure. Now, when you were out on your driveway on the morning of January 25th, 2019, did you hear gunshots?
I don't know what I heard. No, I did not.
Did you hear a popping sound?
Yes, sir, I did.
Did you hear multiple popping sounds?
3. 1, then 2 after that.
Did you speak to police when they came around asking about this case?
No.
You never spoke to police?
Yes, I did.
Okay.
Later on that morning.
Okay. So police came around.
They didn't come to my house, no.
Around? So did police come around your neighborhood?
I had some errands to run that morning. I'd run some errands, and when I came back, Fort Christmas Road was blocked off, and I told the deputy that I lived down the road, and there was a patrol car sitting around my driveway. And they said, go ahead, and but the first entrance to Picket Downs is on the left-hand side, and I stopped and talked to a couple of deputies and told them what I heard that morning. And they sent some detectives out there.
Okay. And did you speak to them?
Yes.
Did you tell them you heard gunshots?
It sounded like gunshots, but I wasn't 100% sure.
Sure, I understand. No
Yeah.
problem. No problem.
Yeah.
Did they sound like gunshots, these popping sounds that you heard?
Well, I've never heard a gun go off inside of a house, and I don't know how big of a gun was used at this crime. I heard popping sounds.
Okay.
It was just unusual to hear those popping sounds that early in the morning.
And you described them as possible gunshots to the police. Is that correct?
Yeah,
Okay.
possible.
It's possible, or did you describe that to police?
Well, I can't remember what I said in my statement back then.
Is it likely?
Possibility.
Okay. Now, did you know where the Amato residence was located based on your home?
Yes.
Did you hear the shots in that direction?
Yes. The popping sounds, yes.
Exactly. I think we went over this, but just in case we didn't, that was the morning of January 25th when you were out on your driveway. Is that correct?
Correct. Yes, sir.
What is the approximate time of those shots? Do you recall? If you don't remember, that's fine too.
I want to say maybe around 9-ish.
This is huge. I mean, if the jury believes that Rodney Funk heard gunshots from inside the Amato home at 9 a.m., the prosecution timeline is out the window. Now, a couple things happened here. On cross-examination, it came out that it was one gunshot in the police report, but Mr. Funk said the police wrote it down wrong. He remembers, and it's not that long ago, it was just back in January, heard 3 popping sounds. Didn't report it initially, but then reported it afterwards after hearing that something had happened at his neighbor's home. So, as a good neighbor should do when you have information, you provide it to investigators, and he did at the time. So the question is, what impact does all of this now have on the case? One other thing I got to tell you about the jury question for this man was, when do they pick up garbage in your neighborhood? And he said on Thursday. Now, the alleged shooting is on Friday, right? Going Thursday night into Friday, but Thursday is garbage day. However, folks, this didn't come out in court. That Monday is Martin Luther King Jr. Day. In my neighborhood, when we have a holiday day, the garbage schedule gets shifted by 1 day. So from my perspective, I wish the jury knew that, or the juror that wanted to know about garbage day, because I wanted to know from Mr. Funk whether or not in his neighborhood, if it's a holiday, does the garbage get picked up 1 day later? And maybe it was the garbage men or women banging that stuff that may have sounded like pops coming from inside the home. But I don't know. Let me bring back in my think tank. I want to start with Charles Mittelstadt, who's fired many guns, many times. Do you think, and Rodney Funk has fired guns before, but he's never heard one inside a home. Your thoughts on what you think he may have heard that morning at 9 a.m.? I believe he's telling the truth, that he heard something.
I think he is. Well, he's incredibly reluctant at this point. I'm sure by now the prosecution got a hold of him and tried to get him to back off of that because they know how devastating that is to their timeline. And that's why you see he's clearly compelled. He's under subpoena for the defense, and he's trying to be as vague as possible at this point. And I think we've noted that because they filed a speedy, they didn't get the benefit of probably deposing him as they have the opportunity to in Florida. And so they have a sort of a less than prepared witness, but they're doing the best they can with what they have to work with. But if the jury believes Mr. Funk, it's devastating. It's all about timelines.
It's game over. The timeline is gone.
Timeline is gone. If the jury believes him.
Because there's another witness who, I had to bring this up as well. I just want to make sure you're up to speed. There was another witness who testified after this that Grant Amato at 9 a.m. is 20 miles away at a job interview. And the person who interviewed him testified that he was kind of creepy and he didn't get the job, by the way. Lawrence, do you think the jury? What do you think the jury is going to think about Rodney Funk's testimony? He heard something. He absolutely heard something.
He's an absolutely unbiased witness that is reluctant. Mr. Amato, we just heard Mr. Funk testify. I strongly urge you not to testify in your defense because he is a great witness. 9 a.m., the shooting happened. You weren't. This is different. You weren't there. We're good. We don't need you.
Mark O'Mara, is this reasonable doubt?
I was just going to say, when you said, what is the jury thinking? If they're thinking, it's reasonable doubt. And if they're thinking, wait a minute, these shots may have happened in the morning when he was 25 miles away, then maybe a reasonable hypothesis of innocence is some other dude did it when Amato wasn't anywhere nearby. And if you get one or two of those jurors talking about that back there, it's reasonable doubt. It is at least a hung jury, and it may well be an acquittal. And again, I echo what was just said. Do not put Amato on the stand at this point. You have too much to lose and nowhere near enough to gain.
All right, and if I'm the prosecutor, rebuttal case, call up Waste Management, find out if in fact the garbage schedule was delayed, because then you could reach that juror that had that question. All right, we've got a question for you, our 13th juror. Grant Amato crying in court today. Those tears, do they help the prosecution or do they help the defense? Go to Vinnie Politan CourtTV or CourtTV. We're both on Facebook. Let us know. You can leave a comment as well. If you notice, I've commented on some of your comments. So why don't you comment on my comment?
So tell us what happened, Grant. Is that how you left your family?
No, I didn't do any of this.
Grant Amato is accused of killing his family.
The rules are simple.
This is a case like I've never seen.
Prosecutors say he stole more than $200,000 from his family to send to this webcam model.
Some girl in Bulgaria got $200,000. I just want the truth.
In June 2018, Grant Amato is suspended from his nursing job and arrested for stealing prescription drugs. This is when he meets Sylvia online through a porn website. 5 months later, in November, his parents, Chad and Margaret Amato, discover Grant Amato has transferred over $200,000 from their bank accounts to support his obsession with Sylvia. Between December 1st and the 17th, Grant and his brother Cody Amato traveled to Japan with a friend, Jericho Fine. While there, Grant claims he's battling depression to Jericho. On December 23, 2018, Grant Amato agrees to go to rehab for porn addiction. He promised to stay for 60 days. But by early January 2019, Grant Amato leaves rehab after spending only 2 weeks there. January 22nd, Grant Amato typed an apology letter to members of Sylvia's chat room, admitting he lied about being wealthy. 2 days later, on January 24th, 3 members of Grant Amato's family were massacred in their home. At 9:15 p.m., according to Cody Amato's girlfriend, Sloan Young, Cody's father, Chad, contacted Cody, urging him to come home quickly because something is wrong. 9:43 p.m., Sloan Young says she received a text from Cody saying things are okay and she did not need to worry about him. 11:41 p.m., cell phone records show there was a text message between Chad and Cody Amato and that their phones were activated via the fingerprint reader. Then at 2:08 a.m. in the early morning hours, an online bank transaction for $599.99 is charged to Cody Amato's account. January 25th, 8 a.m., a neighbor reports seeing a man fitting Grant Amato's description in a white vehicle just outside of their subdivision. At 8:54 a.m., Grant Amato goes on a job interview for a healthcare position. At 9 a.m., a different neighbor reports to police he heard a single gunshot. 30 to 45 minutes later, he noticed police activity. 9:17 a.m., police arrive at the home of Chad and Margaret Amato to do a wellness check. In the afternoon at 2:47 p.m., Grant Amato registers for a room at a DoubleTree Hilton Hotel in Orlando. January 26th, 9:30 a.m., police confront Grant Amato at his hotel. He voluntarily travels to the police station for questioning, which lasts 3 hours and 42 minutes. 4:34 p.m., an officer drives Grant Amato to a Hampton Inn and he checks into a room that was paid for by the sheriff's office. 2 days later, on January 28th, a deputy armed with a warrant arrests Grant Amato at the Hampton Inn on 3 counts of murder. Grant Amato is held without bond. On February 8th, Grant Amato files a claim for Cody Amato's life insurance policy. And on Valentine's Day, February 14th, prosecutors file notice of intent to seek the death penalty for Grant Amato.
And the breaking news tonight, facing the death penalty or potential of a death penalty, Grant Amato is going to take the stand in his own defense tomorrow. This according to his lead defense attorney, Grant Amato, tomorrow morning live here on CourtTV on the witness stand, testifying on his own behalf. Our coverage begins at 8 a.m. Get ready, folks. It absolutely will be the biggest moment of this entire trial. All right, my think tank back with me tonight as we talk about some of the issues in the case. And I want to talk about one of the witnesses who was called, actually recalled to the stand by the defense, Grant Amato's brother, Jason. And it was one question, one issue, but it's a big issue for the defense. It's all about the marijuana.
All right, Mr. Shapiro.
Mr. Amato, I have one question for you. Were you aware of a marijuana growing operation?
No questions?
Any questions, members of the jury? Write them down.
All right, folks. Question from the jury, always important. And they're entitled to do it. And when Grant Amato testifies tomorrow morning, same thing's going to happen. When the prosecution is done cross-examining him, they're done with the redirect, it'll be time for the jury to ask questions of Grant Amato. So Jason on the stand testifying about a marijuana growing operation. And you'll recall that during the testimony of the crime scene investigator, plenty of photos shown to this jury of the armoire up in Chad Amato's part of the home with marijuana growing stuff. I don't even know what to call it, folks. Sorry, not in the business. But anyhow, they found it. They also found some mason jars filled with marijuana and some prescription bottles as well. As we take you back.
This is a question that's permitted to be asked. Were you aware that your mother used marijuana?
No, I would say I am for sure my mother did not use marijuana.
All right. Any questions based on that question, Mr. Shapiro?
None, Judge.
Any questions based on that question, Mr.
No,
Stone?
Your Honor.
All right. Any more questions, members of the jury? All right. At this point, may this witness be excused and released.
For defense, yes, Judge.
Okay. You're excused and you're released from your subpoena.
Okay.
All right, so what are we looking at now? Again, this is a defense witness, and they put in all these pictures of the marijuana in the house. Is this the Breaking Bad defense? And is this a sign of desperation? I mean, is a family executed because they've got 3 mason jars full of marijuana in their house? Was this some sort of huge operation that was going to like take some turf away from El Chapo and his cartel? I mean, what is this about? Mark O'Mara, I want to go down to you. Is this jury really going to buy that this is some marijuana nefarious growing operation taking place? And is that what Grant Amato is going to tell the jury about?
Well, I think there were two purposes for that one question. One was to show, yeah, there's pot involved, there's drugs going on, there's always, that nefarious may be an overstatement, but there's that going on. But I think the other reason why the question was asked and the way he answered it was, it seems as though he's willing to lie, because pot smells, and mason jars full of pot smells quite a bit. It is impossible, I think, in a jury's mind to believe that Chad knew nothing about what was going on. I'm sorry, that his brother knew nothing about what was going on. Jason, I'm sorry, knew nothing about what was going on, but that he was willing to downplay it or lie about it and say no. And maybe they're just trying to get out that this family is willing to tell the truth that they want to tell. And maybe that's going to play into the defense somewhere in closing argument.
All right. The defense did a good job of going after Chad Amato for possession with intent to distribute marijuana, right? Much more than personal use, right? That was, I don't know how much that was worth. The street value, Charles, any idea? Taking a look at that marijuana?
No.
No idea, right?
No idea.
No idea. Good answer.
$1,500.
Okay.
Okay, there we go.
Are you serious? No idea?
I mean, from what I do for a living, it's not that much marijuana.
It's not a lot, right? That's what I'm saying. That's my whole point.
Maybe $1,000.
Like, this isn't Breaking Bad.
Right.
This
But
is
they'd
not
be
like
ineffective, but
call
to
a
not
client.
point out that there's some illegal activity going on in
Correct.
the house, right? They got to put it out there.
Is this the first time, though, that a criminal defense attorney will look at that amount of marijuana and say it's nefarious? Because he did it.
Sure. I mean, they're going to use it to their advantage any way they can in this case. So that's probably just for the weekend party in Orlando, but they're going to point out it must have been somebody coming to buy drugs and they got into a dispute over money and they got executed.
But they left the drugs behind?
It's also probably the first time that a prosecutor will argue, in spite of all the drug paraphernalia, that it's not an operation, right? So, I mean, it's fair both ways.
You're always looking at that other side, aren't you, Charles?
I have to.
I know you have to. So, if in fact you go with this theory, right, that some drug rival came in and whacked the family, right, because of something, why would they leave all the drugs behind?
Well, maybe they
Wouldn't they take the drugs too?
Maybe they didn't expect to get into the dispute and then they whacked them and then left before anybody could get there.
Yeah, that's what I'm going to say. Maybe they didn't expect anybody to be there at the time.
So they did it really quick in the morning.
Yeah.
Listen, they got to put it out
I
there.
mean, the defense has to put it out there.
How viable
They
is
have
it?
to.
Who knows? But if one juror seizes upon it, that's
They have to.
mission accomplished.
Mark, here's a problem for the defense. I'm wondering if you can explain it. Margaret, the mother, she's obviously working at the computer when she is shot in the back left part of her head, doesn't see it coming. All work that she was doing ceases, between 4:30 and 5 o'clock that night. How are they going to, why would she be sitting there? Why would she be sitting there at 9 o'clock in the morning with the chicken cutlets still in the kitchen?
Yeah, correct. I mean, she wasn't. There are certain parts of the state's timeline that are well-founded in fact, and that's one of them. That jury, if they were deciding the very particular question of what time was she shot, the 4:30, 5 o'clock in the afternoon before makes sense. But again, I think the defense is just throwing in those pellets of reasonable doubt to say, look, unfortunately, we do have the tragedy of a family who's been killed. We just don't know exactly how it happened. And if you don't know, again, if they haven't taken away reasonable doubt, and I think that's most of what this defense has been doing, is just saying you cannot be certain.
So, Charles, the other part of that scene with the mom, Margaret, is the wine glass. I'm pretty sure she's not having wine for breakfast.
Right. I mean, that's the problem, and that's why it becomes more evident that this defendant is insisting on testifying, and that the defense team is just simply not successful in talking him out of it. I mean, essentially it's an electronic blackout that happens between like 4 and in the morning, right? Nothing goes on, and they're going to kill him on cross as to trying to explain. So what was going on inside that house while you're there with your family when nothing else?
I think the only thing you could say is that there was an incredible family fight going on, right? Family feud
with guns.
But then 3 of them end up dead. So how do you argue that there was a fight and then I left and then the drug rival came in and killed him? That's crazy. That's what I call unreasonable doubt.
So just remember, I mean, we could throw all these darts at the state's case. They're going to come back during closing and talk about how the judge is going to charge them, and you don't leave your common sense at the door. Use your common sense about the forensics, the the blackout with all the electronics and the Wi-Fi and the phones and the computers. Use your common sense. The chicken cutlets, the wine, forget about it. I mean, they're locking him in. He did a 3-hour and 42-minute interview. Why is he testifying? Maybe they just have it's just a last.
You just gave a great closing argument up in New Jersey with the forget about it. That was great.
And it's just a lot of things they can cross him on, especially I would want to know, you saw news cameras at your house and you just ride by. Like, why didn't you stop to even inquire about, hey, there's news people at my house, at my parents' house? Why? That a reasonable person wouldn't do that.
Wouldn't do that, and then he said he went to the parking lot to get some free Wi-Fi and looked it up for news reports, yet the person who looked at his computer couldn't find any searches for news reports. All right, our 13th juror question, he cried in court. Do Grant Amato's tears help the prosecution or defense? Let me know. We'll reveal those results coming up. So get the votes in. Go to Vinnie Politan, CourtTV, or CourtTV, both on Facebook.
What I told the deputy is not necessarily what it says on the bottom of that page, sir.
Oh, so the deputy lied.
No, that was mistaken.
The deputy was mistaken. Is that your testimony?
What I told the deputy, sir, was that I did not see anyone leave with the firearm, but I suspected that it was involved in this.
States 38 did not come from States 37.
That's correct.
The cartridge cases, they fall at the top. They fall under the identified conclusion. The projectiles, on the other hand, fall down at the bottom, down under eliminated. That's due to a difference in class characteristics.
So based on this statement, it appears as though the methods you relied on in this case fall short of foundational validity based on the PCAST report. Is that correct?
I strongly disagree with their statement.
But that's what the report says, correct?
That's what the report says.
Is the Glock 17 found on the scene could have fired the bullets found on scene according to your own methods. Is that correct?
It could have, however, I believe it's unlikely.
If DNA results are not present, it does not have a bearing as to whether or not an individual ever came in contact with an item, because there is a possibility that you may not leave DNA behind when you do come in contact with an object. Just because you're not present in it, there's the possibility that you still could have come in contact with it.
Now tell the jury what you heard.
I heard gunshots, and I heard them one right after another. And I know that it was less than 5 shots fired, because at the time I made a mental note that was strange to hear gunfire at that time of night.
And with regard to Margaret, Chad, and Cody, what was the manner of their deaths?
Homicide.
Is that wound that you observed to Cody Amato's face inconsistent with a self-inflicted wound?
It is inconsistent.
In this particular case, no, I did not. I did not observe or confirm any other element in the particles that are reported here that would indicate that they came from a source other than gunshot residue.
You would confirm the most you could possibly draw from a positive gunshot residue test is that they possibly fired, maybe, a firearm, correct?
They either discharged a firearm, were in proximity or near someone who discharged a firearm, or touched something that had gunshot residue on it.
Are you satisfied with the arguments that have been presented by your counsel thus far?
Oh, yeah.
And you don't know whether or not he actually got through to his dad?
No, sir, I'm not aware if he did or not.
Did you testify earlier that this would be used for growing marijuana?
Yes, I did. There is a light source here. There is an exhaust fan here. The inside is totally taped up with aluminum foil. And there's some other growing equipment here on the floor.
Any first impressions of the defendant?
My first impression was that he looked a little, as I said earlier, creepy.
Well, we just received confirmation from lead defense attorney Jeff Dowdy that his client, Grant Amato, will take the stand first thing in the morning.
And the results are in from our 13th juror question tonight. Do Grant Amato's tears help the prosecution or defense? 65% say it helps the prosecution, but 35% saying that it helps the defense. What a big day inside the courtroom today. Prosecution rested their case. Then the defense presented 8 witnesses in 2 hours, lightning style. But the question is, who had a better day today? Was it the prosecution or was it the defense? We're going to take it to our think tank. We begin in Sanford, Florida with Mark O'Mara. Who had the better day today, prosecution or defense?
The defense did. They got out their case. They got out some elements of reasonable doubt. They didn't hurt themselves. They have yet to put on their client, so this was a day for the defense.
All right, Lawrence Zimmerman, criminal defense attorney, who had the better day?
The defense had a better day. I concur for all those reasons. And, Mr. Funk was a good witness for the defense. He helped create some doubt. Defense, we'll see what tomorrow brings. I'm probably going to say the prosecution tomorrow will have their day.
All right, Latasha Barnes, who had the better day, prosecution or defense?
Totally agree with the defense. No gun here, no DNA evidence, as well as Mr. Funk really helped their case today. Hearing those gunshots that morning, and he was at an interview at the same time. So that's reasonable doubt.
Defense investigator Charles Mittelstadt, who had the better day?
Better be the defense. By definition, if they put their case up and they didn't make some headway, then they failed miserably. So, as everybody has pointed out, Mr. Funk, if he resonated with the jury, is probably the biggest event for the defense of the day in terms of shattering that timeline.
All right, big day today, but guess what, folks? Tomorrow, an even bigger day.